Hello, my name is Dr. George Walters-Sleyon, and as we celebrate this 4th of July, I want to bring to your awareness the history of this 4th of July. Okay, America's independence was on July 4th, 1776. But this particular era was the height of what is called the Transatlantic slave trade and the height of chattel slavery. In my book, The Rush for Black Diamonds, I provide the background towards this by using the works, looking at the works of John Locke, two prominent Western intellectuals, John Locke and Thomas Jefferson. John Locke was a British philosopher, intellectual, and secretary to the British Parliament, and the first person to write the British colonial policies. He wrote actually the fundamental constitution of the Carolinas, in which he argues that every slave master has absolute right over his slave. John Locke would also go on to assert the claims of life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. And that property were slaves. Okay, he was born 1632. We come to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was born 1743. But Thomas Jefferson became the third president of the United States. Senator, secretary, governor, etc. Prominent, absolutely prominent individual. But Thomas Jefferson's role in the development of the American Constitution, in the development of the American political consciousness is very pivotal. And as much as we celebrate the 4th of July, it is important for us to look at that. Now, in the book, I also use Frederick Douglass and W.E.B. Du Bois as interlocutors, okay, to negate some of the claims of Thomas Jefferson and John Locke. Now, in 1776, when America had its independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. He says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Now, it is important to note that Jefferson's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is an adoption of Locke's life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. If you read Locke's work, and in here I discuss that as well, life, property and happiness are used interchangeably. So it's important to note that. But Thomas Jefferson is known for appropriating most of the works of John Locke. So again, Thomas Jefferson would talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that we are all equal. However, at this particular time, Thomas Jefferson was holding over 500 slaves, black people, on his plantation in Monticello in Virginia. Again, talking about inconsistency with respect to independence. And so here, talk about the works of Frederick Douglass and his speech. Now, Frederick Douglass gave a profound speech that is often quoted this day. Okay, what has the slave to do with the 4th of July? That speech was given on the 5th of July, 1852. Now, Frederick Douglass was born in 1818. That was the height of the transatlantic slave trade. That was the height of chattel slavery, before the abolition of the slave trade by the British in 1833. Now, for the United States, it would take a civil war. It would take a civil war to end chattel slavery and to end the domestic and international slave trade in 63 and 1865 with the ratification of the 13th Amendment. Now, that is a background to this 4th of July, the height of the slave trade. Now, in this book, in my book, The Rush for Black Diamonds, I talk about, I provide an analysis of Frederick Douglass' profound speech. Frederick Douglass articulates this travesty very well. He says the United States is guilty of the cruelest maltreatment of human beings. Take the American slave trade, he says, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now. He goes on to say, this trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. It is carried on in all of the large towns and cities in one half of this confederacy, and millions are pocketed every year by the dealers. He will go on to describe the extent to which this particular trade has affected and the extent to which this particular trade continues to be validated by the political leaders. Okay? Here Douglass says, he critiques this. He says, he critiques the 4th of July as also as Jeffersonian. Now, what is Jeffersonian slavery? Jeffersonian slavery is that peculiar American slavery trade and chattel slavery, that peculiar American consciousness with respect to race, because Jefferson was the first person who in American among American philosophers who would argue that black were intellectually inferior to whites, and that becomes a fundamental claim in the constitutional and consciousness of white America. Okay. He says, this is what Douglass says. He says, however, Douglass' reference is a bit sarcastic. He explained, to say that America was right and England was wrong is exceedingly easy. Everybody can say it. Okay? Now, he's talking about America's independence and its negation of or rejection of the British, saying that the British were oppressors. He said, but how can you say the British are oppressors when you yourself are involved in enslaving millions and millions of people? While extolling America's resistance to British oppression, Douglass is careful to acknowledge the founding fathers. He goes on, he says, fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedoms and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? No. He describes the richness of American justice, but noted that it was not applied to the concerns of his people. He said, a rich inheritance of justice, liberty, and prosperity and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? I can today take up the plaintive lament of appealed and woe-smitten people. Douglass is describing the grave inconsistency between the founder's theory and practice. Because while Jefferson and others will assert this profound concept of justice, Douglass is saying you are also enslaving me and my people and selling us on the market and breeding us as well. It's a profound thing. He said, whether we turn, this is Douglass, he says, whether we turn to the Declaration of Independence of the past or to the profession of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly hence binds herself to be false to the future. That is profound. Again, I will read that. Douglass says, America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. And I think Douglas' words are very profound when we think about what's happening today. Is America still false, or is America true to the Declaration of Independence that he asserts with a lot of things that are happening? Douglas goes on, he said, what am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty and to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men? Douglas' work, the 4th of July, given in 1852, his speech is profound. And I think it helps us because here we are dealing with the consciousness of race in the United States at this particular time, this 4th of July. And Douglas is saying America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. I want to encourage you to get this book. It's called The Rush for Black Diamonds, and it's on my website, www.georgewaltersleyon.com. But again, Douglas' words are very profound as we celebrate the 4th of July. Think about it. Thank you very much.